We are slowly getting there, but it will be here before you know it. And we're in a series now in which we're going to get to the point where we finally arrive at that spot that had been brewing for thousands and thousands of years. The showdown between the Son of God and the enemy of God. And we know, and I don't mean to spoil the fun for you, spoiler alert, God does win. We get that, we know that. We have Easter, we celebrate that pretty much every day, I hope, in our lives. But we're going to talk about the showdown moving in that direction. And with any showdown, you want to know the people that are involved. Last night, I know there was a UFC fight night on television, and some of the fights did not go as long as the others, so they have some time between, and they always give you a backstory to help you know who I'm going to be cheering for. You see two strangers, but once you know the backstory, your heart goes out to one of them. As we talk about the backstory here today and next week, I'm not doing this so that you can decide who you're for. I hope by your presence here, you've already established whose side you're on come Easter weekend. But the reason is that sometimes we need to know the backstory to really understand why the showdown is happening and why it's happening and unfolding the way it is. And if you and I know the backstory leading up to this showdown that we have on Easter weekend, we better understand why Easter happened, why it happened the way it happened, why it was always going to happen, and why it was always going to happen the way it did happen. And we know that a little bit more when we understand the backstory. Now, I don't spend much time devoted to this subject today, but we're going to begin not with talking about the champion. We're going to begin talking about the challenger. So let's get into the devil today just for a little bit. Now, I sometimes get a little too into what's going on. I think a little too much about it. I'm a little obsessive anyway with my personality, and I feel that way even in teaching the Bible. I'm a messed up, stressed out, anxious cat on Sunday mornings, and it's not because I feel like it's on me. God's Spirit is going to be the difference maker, not me. I know that. But because last week I wasn't here and the church didn't fall apart and people got saved, so it was a good day without me, which, may or may not have made me feel good. But I get worked up on Sundays just because I feel the heaviness of it, and I care so much about this moment because I never know when it's the last opportunity we have for you. So it wouldn't surprise you, perhaps, to know that at times while I'm asleep, I even begin to dream about things that matter to me. And this past Tuesday night was one of those nights. And I don't know what time it was. I didn't pay attention before or after. But I was dead to sleep, and I was in the middle of a dream. And as I dreamed, I was exercising, not lifting weights. I'm exercising demons out of people. Okay, so apparently I'm just a little too passionate about what's going on. I knew we had this message coming up, and I also have watched The Conjuring universe perhaps too many times, but that's neither here nor there. But I'm there in my dream. I'm in a spot, and this family is gathered around. There's a kid that's been possessed, and I'm there. And I'm feeling as overwhelmed in there as you would imagine. But I got to the point in the dream, which probably in real life lasted about 42 seconds. But in my dream, it was, hours and hours. And I got to the point where it was on. I'm not even going to describe it because there might be some of you squeamish people in here. But I yelled out to the top of my lungs in my dream, "You can go back to hell," the whole deal. So then I woke up and I thought, okay, I can play this off like that really didn't just happen. Or I can look over and see a wife going, "Who are you talking to? Like, what is really..." So I leaned over and she said it was more of a roar, it wasn't really as legible. And she said, "What did you say?" I was like, "No, I'll see you in the morning." Like, we just kind of go on, let's move on. And so we got to the next day and I could talk about it, laugh about it. And my daughter, who's my little scary movie buddy, she was able to celebrate with me on the fact that I finally exorcised a demon in my dream. But so yeah, perhaps I care a little too much. And perhaps I've thought about this a little too much. And maybe that's why I need to be careful how often we talk about this. But Gesundheit, I think, or to bless you, I think that's what I'm supposed to say. That old days, that was casting out demons. I did it twice now. I've exorcised 2 demons. That sneeze was evidence there. But I want us to talk a little bit, just for a moment, about the evil one. Not because I feel like it's imperative that you understand everything about the devil. And I'm also aware that there is no other name under heaven by which man is saved. And so learning about the evil one is not going to lead us to salvation. I understand that. And ultimately, that's what matters. But understanding the backstory sometimes helps us to understand why it happened the way it happened on Easter. And it keeps us from getting all of our theology and understanding from movies, which I apparently need help with. We'll work on that together. Maybe it's therapy for me. I don't know, but we'll jump into this together. So the Showdown, we're going to look at the challenger today. I almost called him just the chump, and do the chump and then the champ, but we'll be kind. We'll call him the challenger today, and we'll look at the champion next week. But as the tail of the tape for any fight, we're going to begin with the tail of the tape with the challenger here, and I want us to look at his name very briefly. Now, you might call him the devil, you might have a different name for it, but in Scripture, the challenger is often referred to as Satan, which is a Hebrew word for the adversary or one who resists. And at times, there's even an article in front of it. So it's the Satan or the accuser. And Satan shows up 18 times in the Old Testament as far as we read it. 18 times, 14 of those are in the book of Job in the first 2 chapters. So there's not a lot of talk of it. And that's why at times we have a little confusion there. But that's what the word Satan actually means. There's also another name, and maybe it would be in the nickname category if you were putting his name out there as the contender, as the challenger. But the name Lucifer, and it actually comes from Isaiah chapter 14. And it's really has more to do with light, a beam of light. And if you look into Isaiah 14, you'll find what you'll find in a couple of other places where the prophet is actually talking about a real life person. And there's a judgment going against that person. And in these instances, it's not a positive thing. And he's talking about a person, but then he continues on and morphs into gets to a point where even the hearers must have thought, are we still talking about the evil king? Because it sounds like we're talking about more. So for the last few thousands of years, people have looked back and people have been able to study God's story and think, okay, he's talking about this real life king for a moment, but then there's also this prophetic portion, the supernatural portion where you're talking about the past and even the future for our enemy. So we have this reference to Lucifer being this light bearer, literally. So we'll find those 2 places, and we'll get to Isaiah here in just a moment. But let's move to the hometown. That's the name. Then we get to the hometown, because when you're doing a tale of the tape, when you're reading about a fight, a showdown, someone always has their birthplace, their hometown, where they came from. When I was growing up as a little kid watching professional wrestling, if it was a really, really bad guy, they would say he's from parts unknown. Like he's so bad, we don't even know where he came from. He was just born with a mask on. He's been beating up babies and kids ever since he was, just like his whole life. He's just parts unknown. And as a child, I thought that was kind of cool. Now as an adult, it's ridiculous. But nonetheless, that was part of me growing up. And it's easy for us to look at our enemy and think, well, he's a parts unknown kind of guy. But if we're able to understand Isaiah and Ezekiel, the 2 primary prophets that refer to the evil one, the adversary, then we actually have a little more understanding of where he came from. So let's turn to Ezekiel chapter 28, if you have an Old Testament there with you. Ezekiel chapter 28, and we have the beginning in which Ezekiel is giving a message against a real life person. He's the king of a place called Tyre, which is modern day Lebanon. And preaching against, giving a warning against the king, or if you're from Tennessee, Lebanon. And so he's speaking against him, this king, this leader in Tyre. But then there's a transition that makes us think maybe he's talking about someone else or someone in addition to. But let's read the first 2 verses first. Ezekiel said, "In the pride of your heart you say, I am a god. I sit on the throne of a god in the heart of the seas. But you are a mere mortal and not a god, though you think you are as wise as a god." And people hearing this who were familiar with that king were going, he is, as my grandmother would say, he has outgrown his britches. And so he is at a space where thinking, I'm bigger than I actually am. So they grasped this, but then we move on to verse 12, and there seems to be a shift in which you could still argue, maybe he's giving an illusion or an image to that king, but there are so many other things involved that help us to understand he's meaning something more. He says, "You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you. Then skipping down a few phrases, he says, you were anointed as a guardian cherub, for so I ordained you. You were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fiery stones. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created till wickedness was found in you. Through your widespread trade, you were filled with violence and you sinned. So I drove you in disgrace from the mount of God, and I expelled you, guardian cherub, which is an angelic figure here, from among the fiery stones. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. So I threw you to the earth. I made a spectacle of you before kings. By your many sins and dishonest trade, you have desecrated your sanctuaries. So I made a fire come out of you, and it consumed you. And I reduced you to ashes on the ground in the sight of all who were watching. All the nations who knew you are appalled that at you have come to a horrible end and will be no more. So as he's reading through, it seems to be more. He's talking about this cherub, this angelic figure who's been expelled, who was there in the beginning in Eden, and who he also created, but has now gone on, has been pushed out, and will face a terrible, terrible end to his story. Now, if this was all we had, maybe we would think, it's probably about that king. But Isaiah does the exact same thing in Isaiah chapter 14 in a completely different context, speaking about Babylon, not speaking about Tyre or Lebanon. He's talking about a different place, a different empire. And in Isaiah chapter 14, the first 10 verses seem to address this Babylonian empire, which is often an image and a picture of something down the road, apocalyptic, that's going to happen. And you can read that in the book of Revelation. But then it appears there is a shift, and he says these words, how you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to earth. You who once laid low the nations, you said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit. Those who see you stare at you. They ponder your fate. Is this the man who shook the earth and made the heavens or the kingdoms tremble? The man who made the world a wilderness, who overthrew its cities and would not let his captives go home? So as we read through there, Isaiah seems to be speaking about something more. And if we were to put those things together, understanding the character of the enemy that's alluded to throughout the entire story of God, we know that there was a time when this adversary, the enemy, was created. There was a time when he was closer to God, and there was a time where he chose not to fulfill his creative purpose. He rebelled, and he was cast out. And then we've got some allusions to something bad that's going to happen down the road, although it's not completely spelled out. I do encourage you at some point, if you want to read more, Revelation chapter 12 and Revelation chapter 20 gives us the end of the story for the enemy. Again, I don't think I have to say much. It's not a spoiler alert to realize he didn't get his way on Easter Sunday. But if you want to know a little bit more about the future there, then that'll help you out. Well, that's the backstory. That is as far as the name and as far as the hometown. But I want us to get through the strengths. Because even though he's not ultimately going to win, he does have strengths. And I want us to take a look at what those strengths are, because they certainly affect us. The first one is this. He is a master schemer. And schemer is an odd word we don't often use, but that's what he does. He schemes and he plots. The enemy has not just put a bunch of random landmines in your life and he's sitting back and waiting to see if you trip over them. He's not a dark cloud of evil that just hovers around, and as long as you stay out of the cloud, you'll be okay. It's personal. It's plotted. It's schemed. I would not go so far as to give him the term intelligent. That's maybe more than he deserves, but he is not stupid. And he attacks with purpose. And in Matthew chapter 4, when Jesus was by himself in the wilderness for over a month, we read in verse 2, after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him. The enemy waited until the time of fasting had ended. He waited until Jesus was starving. He waited until Jesus had been alone by himself, away from his people, for longer than he'd ever been away from his people before. He waited until it got to a time where he could emotionally, mentally prey on him, and that's when he attacked. And that's what he's going to do to all of his enemies. And if you belong to God, then you're an enemy of the enemy, and he's going to come after you. You say, well, what's he going to do? How will he attack me? Well, how would you attack you? Knowing mentally, emotionally, physically where you are right now, how would you attack you? If you wanted to take yourself down, which I hope you don't want to do, but most of us are pretty good at self-sabotage anyway. But if you wanted to take yourself down, where would you hit? How would you attack? Because again, he's not all-knowing, and he's certainly not able to do whatever he wants to do. We'll look at that in a moment. But he is purposeful with his attacks, and he is going to attack you at a place where you're most vulnerable. In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 11, it tells us to put on the full armor of God so that we can take our stand against the devil's schemes. Like, he has a plan. It might not be the best plan, but it's taken down millions of people through the years, so it's not the worst plan either. He's attacked. He says, be on guard, be careful, put on the full armor of God, because you need to be able to protect yourself against the schemes. He has his plots. He has his ways. He knows what he wants to do. So a master schemer, he's also a relentless tempter. He doesn't give up with one. But I use the word tempting because we know the devil tempts, but that's his primary way of getting at you. He's not physically going to attack you. I mean, I had a dream about a weird thing, and I'm not saying those things still don't happen anymore, but that's absolutely a dream. That's not theology, it's not real, but he will tempt you. Because from his perspective, his greatest weapon is to get you to make a poor decision that will damage and destroy even your own life. Like, that's the goal. Not to somehow do something physically, not to make the floor really slippery so you'll fall down and bang your arm or whatever. Like, okay, those are tough things. But more importantly, he would like to tempt you with the decision that ultimately is going to lead to your destruction. Because for most of us, I say us, including myself, when we make bad decisions, we don't just go looking to punch something and put the face of the devil up there and just knock him out or throw darts or we turn on ourselves. When you do something self-destructive and you hurt yourself, usually the first person you hate is you. You may lash out at other people, but you're so disappointed in yourself that you begin to crumble, and Satan can just step back and say, well, I'll move on to somebody else because he's done. She's done. I've got her. I've got him already. If he can tempt you to make a decision that ultimately will destroy yourself, that's the win. He's a relentless, relentless tempter. And in John chapter 13, verse 2, Jesus was with his disciples. The evening meal was in progress, and it says the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. And if you go back through the first 3 years, or the last 3 years of Jesus' story, over and over, you'll find these moments in which Judas had an opportunity, had a chance to truly become one of the disciples of Jesus. And there's always this nagging hesitation. And we read later on in John, or previously, I guess, in John chapter 6, where we're even told that Jesus looked and said, I've called all 12 of you, but one of you is of the devil. In other words, one of you doesn't belong to me. And we found out later it was Judas. He was never one of them. Moment after moment, opportunity after opportunity, but Satan just needed to get one disciple, just get a hold of one. And he was relentless in his pursuit of Judas, and ultimately it worked. At least that part of the plan did. A relentless tempter. And then finally, as far as his strengths are concerned, he is a natural deceiver. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14 says, Satan masquerades as an angel of light. He knows better than to show you his ugly side. So he shows you a side of him that's not even really him. He shows you something that you actually sit back and think, you know, if I made that decision, I know it goes against everything, but I think that will actually make me happy. I think I can turn this around. I think I can hide that. I don't think anyone will ever actually find out. I don't think it will show in my attitude. I don't think it'll show in my face. I don't think it'll show up in my bank account. I don't think it'll show up over here at work. I really think this might work, and it's just a charade. It's Satan masquerading as an angel of light when we know that is not the truth. And in John chapter 8, Jesus said, you belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. It says when Satan speaks, he can't do anything but lie. Some people speak English, some people speak Spanish. He just speaks lies. That's all that he does. It's his native language. And many of us have allowed him to have our attention more than any other voice in our life, and even more than the voice of truth itself. So he has strengths, but we don't have to worry because there are weaknesses as well. And anytime you get in a fight, and some of you I know will probably have a fight this week, and anytime you get ready for a fight, you want to know the weaknesses of the person that you're fighting. Some of you now, like, oh yeah, I do have a little angry side to me. I see that. I can see it up here. I just hope it's not geared towards me. But I want to share with you some weaknesses of our enemy. Number one, his time is only here, and his time is only now. Important for us to grasp this, because Satan, as much damage as he has done, is desperate, because this is it. There will be no glory after this. This will be as good as it ever gets for him, and it's not even good for him. But there's not going to be a down the road, this huge kingdom that rivals the kingdom of God, not at all. This is his place, here and now. This is his kingdom. When I was a little child, we would try to talk about the devil, and he's in hell, and he's trying to shout up all the... He is not in hell. He is here. He is around us. He is all around us. And we have some scriptures here to teach us. In Job chapter 1, verse 6, it says, one day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came with them. And the Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? And Satan answered the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. He says, I'm here. This is my place. I'm not burning in hell, the pitchfork and horns and all those things. I am here and now, messing with your creation, going to do whatever I can to deceive them to follow me and walk away from you just as I did. And then 1 Peter 5:8, I know Josh read this last week at the beginning of his message. He said, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. This is his place, here and now. And that's a weakness for him, because there is no end of the story that turns out well for him. I don't know that he has a copy of Scripture. He might have one on his iPhone, but the devil should already know how Revelation 20 is going to unfold, where for here and forever he is cast out into a place especially reserved for him called hell. But it's not now. It's later. Another weakness, he can only do what he is allowed to do. He is not a black hat evil version of a white hat good God. They are not rivals. They are not equals at all. He is only able to move. He is only not thrown into hell right now because God has chosen not to do that yet. That time will come. But he can only do what he is allowed to do. In Job chapter 1, verse 12, the Lord said to Satan, very well then, as Satan was asking to mess with Job, he said, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself, do not lay a finger. He said, you can't touch his life, but I'll let you mess with his stuff, because ultimately he's going to choose to worship me in a way that you did not choose. I'll prove it to you. He said, you can have the rest. So there is some freedom, but it's not unreachable freedom. It's limited freedom. It's limited ability. God said, you cannot do what I don't even allow you to do. And then also a weakness, he can only do what he is invited to do. Now, who would invite the devil into our lives? Like, what does that even mean? In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 27, we've got this truth about anger. We know anger and bitterness are signs of people who are not trusting in God. It's spoken against. It's not just the only time here, but this is the example. He says, in your anger, don't sin. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. So when you live your life in a way that is not according to God's truth, he said, you're giving the devil an inch. You're inviting him into the picture. You're giving him some space. You're inviting him in. And only then can he begin to mess with you. If you don't invite him in, he has no power there. But every time you and I live in such a way that doesn't honor the truth and what God's given us, we're inviting him in. Now, we don't think of it this way. And so I was thinking about the phrase mixed signals, because that's really what we often do. We come into a place like this and we stand up for Jesus and we sing to Jesus. And we think, get out of the way, devil, and we cast him out. We blame every bad thing on him. And then we leave here, and so often we stare at the stuff that he puts in front of us. We think about the stuff that he prompts us to think about. We like the posts that he inspires, if you will. We sink a lot of time and energy and money and thoughts into him. And then the devil's looking at this like, oh, you want to be a part? Like, no, get away from me, devil. I belong to the Lord. I've even got it on my profile. I am his. He is mine. That's the thing. And then we step in and go, oh, but I like that, I like that, I want that, I want that. Oh, so you like get away from me. There's just this weird, it's almost like we're trying to date the devil in middle school. It's like, oh, get away, oh, come on. Very confusing. And yet most of us, way past middle school. And we treat him that way. And yet in James chapter 4, verse 7, it says, submit yourselves to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Like he's got to run away. If you say, get out of my life, he has to leave. He has no choice. Truth is, he has a truth allergy. That's probably going to be the weakness that takes him down more than anything. Some of you have a nut allergy. Some of you have lactose. Can I get but some of you don't even know what a truth allergy is, but when you speak truth, he has to run. Jesus did this. He's in the wilderness and he's tempted with stuff that looked good, masquerade as light. And Jesus just began to quote scripture, little bit after little bit, little bit after little bit. Here's a verse, here's a verse, here's a verse, here's a thought. And until you get to the point where you speak and you listen and follow truth, obey truth in your life, you're inviting him in. But every single decision to stand for truth, to call it out, he has to leave you. I want to read one last verse to you in 1 John chapter 5, verse 18. It says, we know that anyone born of God does not continue to sin. The one who was born of God keeps them safe, and the evil one cannot harm them. You are not susceptible to the devil hurting you. You don't have to fear the devil. You don't have to fear Satan. You don't have to fear the adversary at all. It's done. He's defeated, and if you're covered by the blood of Jesus, he cannot touch you. But if you are not yet a follower of Jesus, you are opening yourself up. It's like you're still on the market. I'm still deciding. You think, well, I'm not deciding between God and the devil. That's ridiculous. Well, then make the decision. Well, I've got a lot of things going on in my life. I got to make the decision. Because until you do, there is vulnerability there. And I'll tell you that what needs to happen for a few of you for the next 30 seconds is you just need to close your eyes, tune me out, and pray to Jesus and say, God, whatever's left of me that doesn't belong to you, it's all yours now, all yours. I'm all yours, every bit of me. And you need to reach forward, you grab that card, say, today I've become a follower of Jesus, I'm ready to be baptized, and we'll baptize you next week. You need to just get it done, make the decision, and move on. But this mixed feelings, flirting thing we're doing with the devil is so ridiculous. Oh, get away, you're evil, you're gross, you're awful. Oh, I like what you made over here. Oh, get away from me. It's got to end at some point. We don't have to fear him, but be aware that he wants to take you down. He is not your friend. If you go home this afternoon and you read some messages or you see stuff online or you have a conversation and find out that someone close to you in your life is lying to you, is betraying you, is setting you up for a fall, has been watching you, plotting how the best to take you down and embarrass you and cause you to hate yourself and everybody around you, what would you do? Cut that person immediately out of your life. Pray for God to send someone else in to minister and serve them, because right now you're just not strong enough to handle that. You would do whatever you could. And the reality is that our fight is not against each other. We don't have to fear each other. Our fight is against things that are much bigger than that. God's word says our fight is against supernatural things, against the devil and his schemes. And you're not prepared to fight. You don't have the armor on if you're continuing to flirt with the things that he's put in front of you. So make the decision today. And if you are a follower of Jesus, I just want to challenge you to step back and ask, am I giving mixed signals? to my maker? Am I giving mixed signals about who really has my allegiance? Am I giving mixed signals to the people in my home? Am I giving mixed signals to my husband or to my wife? Am I giving mixed signals to my kids? Or am I giving mixed signals to the people I work with? They know what I do on Sundays, but now they're watching me thinking, but I thought you were. The more mixed signals we give, the more of an invitation we're giving for the enemy to come in and invade our space and wreck our lives. That we are protected if we're under the truth umbrella of God.